Welcome to Speaking of Strong Style. We discuss the news, issues, and events surrounding New Japan Pro Wrestling. I am Stephen Conway. With me, as always, is Jeremy Finestone. We are contributors to the Fight Game Media Network. Days do not get bigger than this for New Japan podcasters. We have our first audio feed today. We have YouTubers, New Japan fans. It is Wrestle Kingdom Day, Wrestle Kingdom 17, taking place just hours ago. Jeremy Finestone and I are operating on a distinct lack of sleep. But
3 hours!
It's 1 hour more than I got too. We're on very short. We're working on short sleep today, but for me personally, completely worth it. A wonderful show today, and I of course I'm in Texas, and the pre-show started at 12:20 a.m. So that's right perfectly so that it makes no sense to take a nap first. So because I usually go to bed about midnight, so I just put on coffee and I got my snacks together and I rolled through this whole thing. And we're going to talk a little bit about the pacing of this show, which helped me tremendously. But I rolled through it, the whole thing, and loved every second of it. I had my bag of kettle chips, Jeremy.
I had questions about this.
I get kettle chips. For everyone wondering, I get kettle chips twice a year. And it's on Wrestle Kingdom Day and opening day of baseball season. And today was one of those 2 days I'm allowed to have kettle chips. Otherwise, I eat all the kettle chips.
Well, so you're also kind of burying the lead here in that it's your birthday, dude.
It's my birthday.
Wrestle Kingdom Day is your birthday. And every Wrestle Kingdom Day is your birthday. And it's tied together inextricably. And now you get to do a podcast talking about Wrestle Kingdom and how much you loved it. So happy birthday to you.
Thank you. It's the gift that keeps on giving, because I get to watch a show that I look forward to all year round, and then I get to come out here and talk about it with you, which I love doing. And then we get to do a show too. I would enjoy sitting and talking to you about it, whether we were doing this show or not, but we get to do it for everybody there at home. And it's one of those things where it's just a wonderful way to spend an overnight. And I really had a good time this year. My birthday's off to a terrific start. So what was your experience like there watching Kingdom overnight there on the West Coast?
So
just like everybody else, right?
I have a very small group of friends that I get together with, an intimate crowd. Their names are
nobody you know.
John LaRocca, the Heartbreak Kid David Rubio, Garrett Gonzalez, John Quinn. And we all congregate every so often at one Dave Meltzer's house to watch Wrestle Kingdom. And so I swung by the pizza place about 10 o'clock, picked up 2 large pizzas, a couple others, picked up some beverages, showed up at Dave's. He was up at his office watching it on his laptop. I got the TV set up, turned it on just in time for the first few people of the Rainbow. People filed in through the pre-show, and then we were off to the races. And so
does Dave stay up in his office during all this, or does he join everybody else down there in the scrum?
He is there when the show is going, and he is not interrupted in his viewing of it. He is very methodical in making sure that he can watch what he wants and when he wants it. His internet is pretty finicky downstairs, so we have to spend a little bit of time getting that set up before we go for it on these shows. But he's got a very large TV, a cool dog, plenty of seating, and we all just had a good time and watched Wrestle Kingdom. So cool. I'm not going to give you guys any trade secrets. I definitely know some things, but I don't know anything. I know nothing at all.
That's great. I mean, it's a cool way to watch. And of course, Dave's one of the best journalists there is, covering any sport, really, let alone pro wrestling. So it's definitely a huge day for him in covering this big event, which was very, very newsworthy. A lot of interesting things came out of this show, and leading to a lot more interesting things in the future. It's one of those things where Wrestle Kingdom sometimes feels like the season finale. Fair enough. All the angles build toward Kingdom, and of course you get the big blow off for a lot of things, and the stories that begin sometimes even before the G1 culminate at Kingdom. This one had that and a lot more. There were as many beginnings as there were endings at this Wrestle Kingdom, which made it not unique. That's happened before, but this one felt a little more forward looking than most, which tend to be about Other kingdoms have been about wrapping things up. This one was about transition. This one was about moving forward, and it has a lot of positive momentum going forward. I think coming out of it,
there was definitely Inoki vibes, like cascading through the entire show, and in a lot of ways, like the definition of the show was like Inokiism through the main event and the pre-show. So you had these bookends of Inoki dying essentially during the 50th anniversary year. So we've been talking about this for a while. This is putting a bow on a very specific era of New Japan, and we're going into something different. And I guess by doing so, like having the traditional Okada, the flag bearer, back on top as they reset like the landscape of New Japan, which is very clearly happening right now. That's where we're at right now. So let's run it down and talk about how we got to this point.
So Wrestle Kingdom took place at the Tokyo Dome as always, and an announced crowd of 26,085, which is a strong one. It's the best crowd since before the pandemic. Of course, they were almost filling the thing, and then the pandemic struck. But between attendance limits and just kind of a cooler product over the last couple of years, to be fair, this was a much larger crowd than we have experienced since the beginning of the pandemic. And it looked
great.
It did, and the set looked fantastic. They had this ginormous screens up there set up in what I believe is the outfield of the Yomiuri Giants stadium there, the Tokyo Dome. So it looked fantastic. All the entrances looked really good, and there were some very special entrances on this show. The crowd, it's hard to microphone a crowd in a dome. It always is. WWE is better at this than anyone in the world. It always sounds like just a monster crowd on WWE shows. New Japan isn't quite as good at miking their crowds. So at times it did feel like it was a little quiet in the building, although I understand that wasn't the case if you were in the building. It was a cheering crowd that maybe just didn't quite come across on TV the way that it sounded in person. It sounded like it once, and there were moments where you really got the idea like, oh, the people are really into this one. So it was, it was good in that sense. And you hope that this is the beginning of bigger things to come. They had that crowd up to over, I think, 40,000 or the upper 30s before the pandemic right there.
The number I was thinking about was about 40,000 was what like an optimum crowd would be in my, like peak optimum crowd would be 40,000.
Yeah. And of course, you can't really go by the capacity of the stadium because of the set and all the blah, blah, blah. But I think that a really big year, they could probably get about 40 in the place, but So do we just want to start the pre-show and just work our way forward, right?
Yeah, I rewatched the Bolton Oleg match, the 3 minutes of it before the show, because as I previously mentioned, I did not catch that one last night. But
that's okay.
Yeah.
So Bolton Oleg, he is a former amateur wrestler who has now turned pro, but he was part of the Bushy Road amateur wrestling team for a long time and has made the transition to the New Japan Dojo. He is one of the first, maybe the first, we'll have to see how things develop in the future, as part of this new Young Lion program, because he did not come out in black trunks and black boots. He did not. He came out in a red singlet. He did not have his head shaved specifically the way a lot of them do for their debuts. This was his very first match of anything. He went in there against Ryohei Oiwa, who's a terrific young lion, excellent. And this was a simple grappling match with a few moves. There was a body slam. There was a little bit of rope running, not a whole lot. Again, 3 minutes, so just teasing things. But it was a slightly different presentation for a debut than what we're used to. There was no angle to it. It was just made you feel like this guy was thought of in a different way because he had already had his own outfit. He did not play to the crowd a ton here. It was just basically showing the basics. That's nicely done. I'm heavily caffeinated, so he was basically showing the basics. But that was what it.
No, but you're right though. Like that was the deal. It's like you got a taste of what this guy could do. Like 3 minutes, they're both kind of featuring some of their power moves and agility and counters, but there wasn't much to this other than like, does this guy remind you of anybody? Kind of reminded me of Kurt Angle. There was a little bit of that. We're calling, is this guy going to be like Brock Lesnar? No, he might be way more Kurt Angle. Chad Gable, that very like fast but muscular catch wrestler that can lift you quickly and catch the eye basically because of their jerk moves to pull their opponent off the ground. It's a very, very hard to do, but when you can do it cleanly the way that they do, it's really impressive.
Oh, we really put over his power, Bolton Oleg's power. He showed some really good athleticism. He is in phenomenal shape. I mean, this guy is built in all the best ways, built like a fire hydrant. I mean, just like the neck sitting on the broad shoulders and he's just goes straight down from the shoulders. He's just built, and you can just see the power in his legs. And again, when you're a world-class level catch wrestler, that's what you're going to get. And the question is, can he make the charisma transition? Can he make the dramatic transition and get the timing right for pro wrestling? Way too early to know anything about that, but
cautionary tale, the guy's 4-5 years away from like top level wrestling performance, but there's something there, and that's the key thing.
And if there weren't, they wouldn't put him in this position, which is the 100%. Debut in the Tokyo Dome on Wrestle Kingdom. So we'll look forward to that. But like you said, this is not going to happen, I don't think, in the next few weeks. It'll take a little longer than that.
This is a project, but like the prospect there is feels like a 5-tool player, if you could use a baseball term.
So after that came the New Japan Rambo. So this is the Royal Rumble style match, done differently than WWE's Rumble, and in that it comes down to a Final Four. This is for the King of Pro Wrestling Provisional Championship, which is now a belt instead of the trophy. And this is something that they don't announce how many people are in it, and they're very loose with the timing of the entrances. You know, it's not exactly on a solid clock right there, but start off with 2 wrestlers at some designated interval that we never quite figured out what it was, whether it was 1 minute and 45 seconds or a minute and a half or whatever. Whenever they felt like it, they sent another guy out into the ring. You could be eliminated by going over the top rope. You could be eliminated by pinfall, by submission. And they don't tell you who's in it or how many people are in it. So there's a big sense of mystery and a little bit of surprise as people came down. It began with Sho from the House of Torture and Hikuleo, who, of course, just recently left Bullet Club. And that's where the match began. This one had a little bit more of the regular roster in it. If you look back at past Rambos, there's always people. It's a way to get people on the card that don't have their own match, right?
It's a potpourri of talent.
It's a potpourri of talent. And they have also in the past done things like have the legends come out and make little surprise appearances. You know, like Cheeseburger has been in it a few times over the years.
I was thinking Cheeseburger, like that's the go-to example.
Great Kabuki came out, and this is often where you saw Fujinami, but we're doing some things a little bit differently this year. So this year, it felt like they were taking this a little bit more seriously in that there weren't any real comedy entrants. I mean, Taguchi does comedy and Yano does comedy, but they're part of the regular roster. This was a regular roster battle royal. Comes down to the Final Four. Once you're down to 4, those 4 will move on to New Year's Dash in the morning here. And they will compete for the KOPW 2023 title. So with this Rambo, I mean, it's almost, I always think about battle royals as similar to science fiction. I heard this recently. There's a limit to how good it can be, but there's no limit to how bad it can be.
Ooh,
so
what a way to go with that one.
That's how I think of it. And this one, I heard that recently on from another podcast called
Spicy Take.
But this one wasn't too bad. I thought that the competitors took it seriously. I thought that a lot of the work was pretty good, and there were nice little moments throughout. But what was your take on this Rambo here? And then we'll get to the Final Four after you get your thoughts.
So it was really interesting because we were talking about the Rambo in our preview last week with Chris Samuelson, and I ran down this list, and I'm like, if all these people show up in this Rambo, this could be pretty decent. And so I ran down my list. It was Evil, Sho, Yujiro, Hinare, Fale, Chase Owens, Finlay, Gallows, Doki, ELP, Great Okan, Hikuleo, Kenta, Taguchi, Takagi, Taichi, Ishii, and Yano.
Mm-hmm.
And of those, 4 people did not show up in that Rambo. And
yeah.
5 others showed up that I should have thought about. Kanemaru, Jeff Cobb, and the Mighty Don't Kneel.
Yeah.
I did not think about Jeff Cobb because he was injured and he was just kind of like not around, but I'm glad he's back. He's doing great. Not exactly the premier spot for him in this show, but I'm going to forgive that for now. But they used their roster, and when you go down that roster, it's actually a stacked lineup that they have. They didn't need to farm out any talent. They didn't go find anybody. It was all right there, and we went through the match. It was a decent battle royal. I was not expecting one of the final 4 that we'll get to, but the rest of it was just kind of like, okay, let's do this.
So the final 4, and I believe the final entrant in the match, involved Shingo Takagi, who had done promos and backstage comments saying that he was going to go off to either Okinawa or Guam. He was going to take a vacation during Wrestle Kingdom. He didn't have a match. So I'm not going to, well, he ended up being a very busy man. So he was part of this, and it came down at the end, the final 4. Shingo Takagi, who of course ended 2022 as the King of Pro Wrestling champion. That title, such as it is vacated at the end of the year and restarted again at Wrestle Kingdom. It's a provisional title. Mm-hmm. Toru Yano, who has been associated with this thing since the very beginning, the Great Okan, and Sho. That's our final 4. Those are the guys that'll be wrestling for it at New Year's Dash. And Shingo was not nearly done for the evening. He was all over the place. He was involved in 2 more angles to come that we're going to talk about. So it's very interesting there. And Shingo, Yano, Okan, and Sho. Where do you think it's going to go tomorrow?
Well, I was surprised the Sho was in that list. He did not strike me as the one to do that, but I believe there was a Voices of Wrestling report that said he was generally unhappy and going through the motions very recently. So I feel like this is an effort to, just give him something a little bit different. He's also got the Never Openweight 6-man titles. So we were kind of thinking that maybe that was going to be something that was addressed on the New Year's Dash show, but kind of doesn't feel like that's going to happen now since he's already got a match lined up. But if I were to guess, I feel like Great Okan is the guy to walk away with the title and be the provisional King of Pro Wrestling champion to open up 2023. He's got some type of charisma and mystery about the way he wrestles that I feel like he'll be very versatile with the title.
I'm leaning that way too. I think you're right. Yeah. So after that, we had the final match of the pre-show, which is the Antonio Inoki Memorial tag team match. This had a couple of very interesting 6-man tag teams involved. Yuji Nagata, Togi Makabe, and Satoshi Kojima against Tatsumi Fujinami, Tiger Mask, and Minoru Suzuki. They even
okay. You ever the Paul Rudd meme where it's like, who would have thought? Us. Can you believe it? Man, Tiger Mask and Minoru Suzuki on a team it was something. And I had to get that out of my system because it was making me laugh ever since last night.
It's really an odd couple team. The way the Tiger Mask is presented, the way Minoru Suzuki is presented, the idea of them teaming together was a real odd couple situation. And with Tatsumi Fujinami, my goodness. And then they brought back Tiger Hattori out of retirement there, the legendary referee for New Japan Pro Wrestling. He was back there. And Tiger Mask wore his Satoru Sayama style gear. Of course, he was a student of Satoru Sayama, the original Tiger Mask. The current one is the 4th. And
also very tan. Very, very tan.
He's looking very tan. No, you're right. He was. And I texted you during this match that I thought, and I cursed him, I thought that he looked better in this match than he did during the junior tag titles.
Oh, you did.
And then he botched the finish. So it was tough. I have mixed feelings on this Tiger Mask because the Tiger Mask character has such history to it. The first one is Satoru Sayama, who changed the entire industry. The second one was actually in All Japan Pro Wrestling, Mitsuharu Misawa, who I feel is one of the 5 greatest wrestlers who's ever been in the ring. After that, it was Koji Kanemoto, who was an outstanding junior heavyweight wrestler and had a bigger name as his own name than he was as Tiger Mask. Same thing with Misawa, for that matter. But Tiger Mask 4, I feel like, is a guy that was really good early in his career, but for 10 years has just kind of been a guy on a card doing jobs. And I don't know if that's how I want to see the Tiger Mask character. And I was kind of excited that he seemed motivated and energized by this match. And he was actually doing pretty well. And then you see something like the botch finish. And it reminds me when Tenzan fell over while wrestling Bishamon not too long ago. And you're just like, man, is it a good idea to go out there like this all the time? You know, so in the end, it ended up.
There's definitely a sense of smoke and mirrors until the smoke and mirrors fail. And what we got was a scenario where, you know, we got an open-faced Okada roll instead of, you know, the traditional style. It happens. No one is going to look at this match and say, like, Wrestle Kingdom is ruined because of it. No one is going to look at it and say Inoki's tribute was ruined because they botched a finish. So this wasn't – I would love to find the person that said, you know what, I was here for that match. So
fair enough.
It's one of those, like, fuck, shit happens, man. And, you know, we got through it. We got a good laugh. We're like, oh, could have been better. But, you know, like, these are wrestlers that we have cut our teeth on through different generations in our lives, and they're all just there to entertain us one more time. So thank you for that.
And fair enough, because like I said, until the finish, this match was moving along kind of nice. I liked the way it was laid out. Everyone got in, you know, their stuff, but in a way that made sense. It wasn't only like, okay, my turn in, and now I'm going to hit my key moves, and now your turn, now you're going to hit your key moves. This felt like a match, and they even had little spots with Tiger Mask and Suzuki teaming with. I mean, obviously, it's Nagata, it's Makabe, it's Kojima, Fujinami, Tiger Mask, and Suzuki. These men know how to work a professional wrestling match. It's just a matter of their bodies will let them or not, right? And for most of this, yeah, they did. This was, like I said, a little bit of a botch finish, not the biggest deal in the world, but for the most part, I thought it was a strong match. They were doing well out there. So
there is legitimately only one wrestler on this entire show that I can argue got the short shrift or a lack of an ability to shine as they should have in the entire card. And we'll get to that at some point. But for the most part, everybody, like 98% of this show, was given everybody a moment to just look great. So, and what you did with it was up to you.
Fujinami, 69 years old now, by the way. And I'll tell you what, hit a couple of nice looking dragon screws right there. The funny thing about Fujinami
and then he cleaned up and he came out in an outfit later for the Muto match, I think.
In a suit, looking spiffy.
2 hours later, he's right back out there.
Yeah, sitting right next to Masachono, going suit for suit with the man.
Fantastic.
The other thing, by the way, the Tatsumi Fujinami, this is mentioned recently on a show that's on the Fight Game Media Network there. Write this down, with Fumi Saito and Justin Nipper. The dragon screw, which is a move that we're very familiar with, the dragon suplex, which would play a big part in one of our main events tonight, and even the tope in Japan anyway, all kind of pioneered in that country by Tatsumi Fujinami. Incredibly influential man. So worth mentioning there, I thought, because a lot of those moves came in, played very heavily into the stories told tonight. We move on to the main show. So with all that, after all that, we had a little bit of a break there, and we went into the main card. So it opened like a lot of Wrestle Kingdoms do with something go right into fifth gear, right? So it was the junior heavyweight tag team title match. The champions, Catch 2-2, TJP and Francesco Akira, took on Yo and Lio Rush. And I felt like this match was all about featuring Rush. And even though TJP and Akira ended up retaining the junior tag team titles, I felt the real story here was New Japan is going not quite all in, but they're taking Lio Rush very seriously. I don't believe in any way that this is just a guest shot where Rush comes in for a little while. I think they have real designs to make him a part of their junior heavyweight division. It's the perfect spot for Rush and his style, his size. It's the perfect place for him. And it seems that New Japan recognizes it too, because just about everything was set up to make him shine as much as possible. And then in the end, it was Yo getting caught in a inside cradle from TJP. But Rush was a star of this match, or did I misinterpret, Jeremy? What do you think?
No, man. New Japan and Rush are in love with each other. This promotion and this talent, they have a bright future. I've seen Lio Rush in a lot of places. I've seen clips of him in PWG where it just seems like he manages to shine the most, because a lot of other televised promotions that he's in, he's not allowed to cut loose like this. His size and his physique is considered a detriment to him, and he's booked differently elsewhere than he is here. And so he's motivated. He beat the hell out of his face in this match. Got a nasty laceration the length of his eyebrow, above his eyebrow, when he took that what was it, face buster, knee buster.
It's basically a double team flapjack. He just kind of charged at him, and they flapjacked him on the ramp, and that ramp took a lot of beating this time, and unfortunately, one of the biggest blows
took a pound of flesh. It took a pound of flesh.
One of the biggest blows that ramp took was from Lio Rush's face.
Ooh. But they looked great. They are protecting Lio Rush. I'm going to beat the drum again that this dude is going to end up in the singles division, and he will be challenging for the junior heavyweight title. It's just it's a matter of who he's representing in the stable when that happens, because there feels like there's a lot of respect between United Empire and Lio Rush, and it may be reciprocated. But either way, when we get to a point where we have the Lio Rush and Yo match that will eventually happen sometime this year, that's going to be a good one. That's going to be a good one.
It was a terrific match, by the way. I don't want to just mention TJP and Francesco Akira were excellent in this one. I think Yo did a lot of good stuff. Yo's main job was to sell in this one and to make that tag so that Rush could come in and do his rally and shine. And I think he did that part of it well. He was the Ricky Morton of this match, so to speak. But TJP and Akira were terrific. They're making excellent champions. And I have no problem at all with them holding on to this thing, especially if the idea is to one day make Rush a single star. This is a nice little appetizer for the New Japan fans to see what this guy can do. So nicely.
So did Akira make the most of every Super Junior from the Super Junior tournament? Is he the one that made the most of his opportunity?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that's probably it, because after the singles Super Junior tournament, I would have said perhaps Clark Connors, but then he ended up in that team with Taguchi that I think actually ended up hurting him a little bit. And he wasn't on this card. And sometimes that's just a matter of where you have room,
timing, and where the booking and the schedule.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that Clark Connors isn't here isn't that New Japan doesn't think anything of him. That's not what's going on. But I do think out of that, the person that you sit there and talk about that you didn't see before is Akira. And TJP's been around a long time. Akira's a fresh face, and they work really well together. They're a nice tag team. But if either of them ended up in a singles program as well, after what I've seen the past year, you have to take it very seriously. They've really helped themselves.
I agree. I was kind of fishing on that one for you, but I definitely feel like Akira is the one to watch of the 16 or 20 or so that we had that were lined up. Both returning and veteran. I think he's young, he's talented, and he's got a bright future ahead of him.
Moving on to the next match. Now, this one is going to cause us some consternation, isn't it, Jeremy? Because the second match was the IWGP Women's title match. Now, this one was interesting because you had Kairi, who is the champion, just was crowned the champion. It's her first title defense. She's had a couple of matches, one against Utami Hayashishita, one against Saya Kamatani that went to draws, weren't for the title. And, Kamatani one was just before she won the title. And this was her first defense against Tam Nakano. who is one of Stardom's best wrestlers. They have a hell of a crew over there in Stardom, and Tam is excellent. And this one went under 6 minutes, and it's because there was an elephant in the dome, as we called it. You know, they say you got to talk about the elephant in the room. There was an elephant in the dome, and no matter what they did, everyone was sitting there wondering, okay, when this is over with, is Mercedes going to come out? And I guess they just decided we're going to find out real early, because there was an angle afterwards. We had a lot of matches to get through, and the first half of this show was paced very quickly. So in less than 6 minutes, Kairi defeated Tam Nakano. And this was a match that I was looking forward to. I was hoping it was going to go longer than this.
A lot of people were looking forward to this.
I have to say, what was there was great. It reminded me, we were talking a little bit about this before we went on the air. It reminds me a little of those old Coliseum video tapes from WWF back in the day, where you would get like the first 2 minutes of the match and the last 3 minutes of the match, where you would basically see the shine, and then it would go to the babyface comeback at the end. And so you would see just that and this edited together match. You got what was the first couple minutes of a great match and the last 100%. Couple minutes of a great match. And it was fun. It was really good. And what they got in was tight. I mean, there were some snug forearms early in this match. A driver from Nakano that
the spinning back fists were brutal.
The cutlasses, that's what she calls the cutlass there. Of course, Kairi had a wonderful entrance with her pirate gimmick. Fantastic. It was very exciting, but it just wasn't long. And what you're hoping is that someday maybe we'll get the 20-minute match between these two. But this match was pretty much to a delivery system for Mercedes Moné, as she calls it. So we did indeed get the former Sasha Banks. We did get Mercedes Vernado. She called herself Mercedes Moné. She had a hell of an outfit to come out to right there. And she came down very heelish, very cocky. She
Statue of Liberty-esque.
A little bit. The crown that she had was, and I don't know. We have a picture. There we are. There's the tableau. And it's a shame. It's a shame Mercedes hasn't been working out, isn't it?
Yeah, but, she's not taking care of herself.
Boy, oh boy. I mean, she looked in phenomenal shape, and of course, Kairi is too. And she had her hair. I don't even know how to explain that hair. It's almost tiger. It's almost Tiger Mask color. Yeah, it's supposed to be like water and fire, I suppose, isn't it? All at once. And her hair.
She's got it's like her head is in the Wrestle Kingdom logo, and the fire is coming out. So
yeah,
she's got the blue hair, and then she overlaid the fire pattern over it.
She looked fantastic. I mean, it was a really cool look. And off we go. Here we go. Right? She just comes down. She confronts Kairi. Try to move on her. That didn't quite work. But she did end up laying Kairi out and saying that she will meet her at Battle in the Valley in San Jose, Jeremy. If only you were nearby.
They are going to spend that money for her on that show. They said it couldn't be done.
Jeremy, I would like you to tell both our viewers and our listeners how far you would have to walk to see that match.
I have to walk 0.6 of a mile to go to the front door of this match in the Battle of the Valley at San Jose, because I live in downtown San Jose. So this is going to be quite an evening for me to grab some food, meet up with the guys, watch some wrestling, and then wave bye, Mike. I'll see you guys later. And then we'll talk.
You are listening to the voice of a very happy man that he's going to get to see that match right there. Right there.
I got this, and I got Eddie Kingston and Jay White, and I got Sasha Banks versus Kairi. Like I dropped like $40 on this ticket, dude.
Wow, beautiful. And she declared herself the CEO of the women's division. She says you can bank on Monet. See what she did there. And I mean, it was something that everyone was sort of. It was the surprise that wasn't a surprise. Everyone sort of expected it, but I thought that between the outfit, the entrance, the very brief promo right there, delivered exactly what it needed to. I'm excited about the match. I think it did its job.
So there was a little bit of timidness in her, like hesitancy. Like she didn't seize the moment in my mind. There's a little bit of quietness on the mic that like she was expecting like a bigger reaction or something like
Yeah,
that.
well, that's
Just
possible. Yeah.
like there was just kind of this like she was trying to find herself in that moment, and it took her a second or two. And so I think people locked in on that and are going to try and like hit at her not being as big of a star as she is. Give it time. Like, give it time for her to feel this out. This is her first night in a promotion that is not her safety blanket of WWE that she's ever done. And she was put in a position to basically say, balls in your court, don't fail. And she didn't fail. It wasn't an A+, it was an A-. But she's going to knock it out of the park once she's able to feel out who Mercedes Moné is and what she is going to be able to bring to wrestling.
One thing you hear consistently from people who go to Japan for the first time is that it takes a little bit of adjustment to a Japanese crowd reaction. It is different than a North American crowd reaction. And they don't necessarily go nuts immediately for everything. And it's not because they aren't interested. It's that the politeness takes over sometimes. And they will sit and watch attentively and enjoy what they are seeing without being demonstrative. That takes a lot of getting used to for someone who came up in WWE, where it seems like everybody opposite the hard camera just wants to do something to call attention to themselves. And you get people that are just looking for excuses to chant various things, which is fine. That's part of the fan experience in North American wrestling. I'm not knocking that. I'm saying that when you go over to Japan, they will sort of sit and watch politely and attentively until there's something that really moves them. That's an adjustment that everyone has to make when they go over to Japan. I'm confident she will. I think you're right. I think when she got out there, she was just like, why isn't anybody making any noise? Well, because they were sitting there waiting to hear what she was going to say. And instead of trying to shout or chant over her, which is more of the North American style that you're used
pop
to.
As soon as they see the person, it's like, okay, what? I know who you are. Show me what you're going to do.
Yeah, and so she'll get used to it. I'm not worried about her. I'm not worried about her.
Not at all. But that is to address, some of the things that people say, like, don't worry. Do not worry about this woman. This is she's the post woman. She's gonna deliver.
Nicely done. So from here we go to another title match. A lot of title matches on this show. IWGP Tag Team titles, the heavyweight division this time. We had the team of Bishamon. That is Yoshihashi and Hiroki Goto. They are the two-time winners of the World Tag League Tag Tournament. Therefore, for the second year in a row, they got a shot at the IWGP Tag Team Champions. Going into Wrestle Kingdom, it was FTR, Dax, and Cash. Now, this match, again, things were moving very quickly in the undercard. It's worth pointing out that no match on this show, outside of the Rambo, which is, of course, a battle royal and goes a little longer because of the entrances and things like that, no match until the big three. And, of course, we had a double main event, but we also had that junior heavyweight four-way. None of the matches before that went 11 minutes. None of them. So this felt like it was on fast forward a little bit. And you had Dax and Cash, who have been the champions for months, but because of the various politics and the fact that they're American-based and Japan only brought them in for Royal Quest and one other match, I can't sit here and say that this had a ton of steam on it for me. And the match was good, but again, they didn't have time to stretch out like they did at Royal Quest, and they had a fantastic match against Aussie Open. This wasn't on that level, but they weren't really allowed to have a match on that level when you're only going to go 10 minutes, Jeremy. So I thought Goto, Yoshihashi, Dax, and Cash did what they could, but there's no such thing as an epic 10-minute match. You can have a really fun match, and you can have really good matches, and there are people that have high-speed, quick TV title tournament matches were wonderful and things. It's not, but that kind of thing that FTR does best, which is tell a long, meandering story within the tag team structure that leads to this big climax. No time for that. So it didn't feel like one of those FTR matches that we saw throughout 2022. Bishamon got the win and brought the tag team titles back into New Japan. Probably the smart move, having part-time champions. I can't say it was a complete success on that. Just it felt weird to have the titles just out of circulation like that. Mm-hmm. So I think they did the right thing in putting it back on Bishamon. Again, it's one of those matches where you, similar to the women's match, you almost wish you could see the 20-minute version of this.
Well, okay, so we've had Bishamon win this World Tag League 2 years in a row and then go on and win the titles at Wrestle Kingdom. Dangerous Tekkers last year. Then we got FTR this year. When that happens 2 years in a row, you're looking for the pivot point. You're looking for the point of like, okay, where do we divert from what happened already? And we have like a little bit of a different diversion of the story we've already seen. But that didn't happen. We had Bishamon, who got bottlenecked through as the opportunity to face Wrestle Kingdom FTR because of the World Tag League. Plenty of different teams that could have been in this position to just be the one to take the belt off of FTR, because this did feel somewhat academic. Like we're doing this by the numbers. This time to like move on. Didn't quite accomplish and hit all the goals that we wanted to, but nobody's gonna be any the wiser. We'll just keep going, and FTR can challenge for the IWGP, and they'll be legitimate contenders in the future if they are in tag matches at Forbidden Door, here, there, or everywhere. Their legacy has done well with this. Even if it feels like a fart in the wind ending for FTR for the AAA titles and the IWGP titles both being lost within a week of each other, people are going to look back at their 2022 and want to revisit this era and want to revisit their matches and want to revisit this time. And they're not going to be watching week to week to week to week. They're just going to be watching all these matches and catalogs that happened during this time. And when you watch it like that, people are going to love the FTR era and they're going to talk it up and everything is going to be fine. This is going to be a dip in the quality of the general caliber of what they had between 2022 and 2023. But man, did you see Dax? He looked like he was miserably hurting. Like he was just like he went hard once he was in the ring, but like he just looked like the last couple of months of wrestling had just taken it out of him. Even that AAA match that he had the other night, like this dude that those dog collar matches and those matches that he's been having for the last 6 months, they're catching up to these guys. And so maybe it was for the best that they dropped these titles. Was it the best? No. Do I worry about the FTR's legacy? Not at all.
I want to qualify something here too. Yeah. I don't want anyone to think that my opinion of this was that it wasn't a good match. I'm saying they didn't have time to make it a classic like some of their other big matches, but I thought this was a really good match. That there were
I thought it was a lot of
I thought there were a lot of very interesting ways for them to get in and out of each other's finishing moves. I thought there were some terrific near falls. Goto powered out of a power bomb attempt by Dax. And then there was a headbutt, a suplex by Goto.
I kind of felt like when they hit the big rig in the middle of the match, that gave it away.
Yeah. And then Dax and Yoshi had a scramble going. And they were working on Dax pile drives him. There's a kick out, a spike pile driver on Yoshihashi, and then Goto barely made a save right there. The spike pile driver being the double team move. Yoshihashi got out of a big rig, and then they finally managed to get the double team GTR on Dax. So I mean, these guys they got a lot done in the time they had, in that there were a lot of really exciting near falls. FTR hit a Power and Glory very earlier. They got a big response from the crowd. That was actually one of the first real oohs from that audience of the night. And so overall, I mean, I thought it was really good. I just think it could have been a classic if they had 20 minutes, but then of course you can't really, well, you could, but you shouldn't do an 8.5 hour show. We had a lot to get done tonight.
You and I have gone back and forth about the level of work that Bishamon has been doing on cards that other people have been phoning in for the last year and a half. And regardless of how we feel personally about FTR, neither of us can argue that what they've done in the ring flat out has been amazing this year. So when I say it's just okay, it's because my expectations of both teams at this point were so high. But you got to take into account even what they told us in the thing. They had a miserable travel getting here. They were 2 missed flights, 7-hour drive, jet lag. They looked like they hadn't slept in a couple of days when they came out, and then it turned out they hadn't slept in a couple of days since they came out. So all the factors were stacked against them for them to have a really great match. Even the build, all the graphics, they didn't have any graphics for FTR. They weren't at the press conference. It was just, it is what it is. But when people go back on this era, like, this is going to be a great match as part of a catalog in a series of very special matches for FTR.
And the title has changed hands just about every year since 2014 at Wrestle Kingdom, by the way. That heavyweight tag team title tournament, tag team titles change hands a lot. So, that took us to a tournament final. So it's a little bit different than a title match. We are establishing a new champion instead of someone defending one, but there was another belt out there. And this was Ren Narita against Zack Sabre Jr. This was the finals of the TV title tournament that has been going on for months now. And Zack set the tone early by working grappling moves, working Narita's arm early in this one. Again, of course, we're talking about two of the best technical wrestlers. That's what this belt is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about for younger people, so to speak. Also, shorter time limits, and the matches will be available on social media for anyone who wants to watch. So it's supposed to be a more accessible championship, so to speak. Zack started it early. He set the tone in some of the interviews where he said he's never had singles gold in New Japan. He's had one tag team titles, but not singles. And he really wanted to add that to his resume. So he was working the arm and doing a lot of grappling. Narita's offense was very Shibata-esque. Katsuyori Shibata, of course, his mentor, and who he's basically channeling with this entire gimmick. A lot of kicks, a lot of strikes, and overall. And
a lot of challenges to strike him.
Yes, there was a lot of Bushido in this one, which is that macho thing where I'll hit you and you hit me, and then we'll see who falls first, by God. And that's a New Japan trope, actually. That goes into a lot of New Japan matches. But so it was basically grappling versus striking. In the end, Ren actually went for a takedown on Zack, but ran into the armbar, and it ended up being a quick tap.
Flash tap. You didn't even see it. It just happened.
Sort of like what actually happens in an MMA fight where you don't sit in the armbar forever because it will break. So it was done in a way that was a little bit of a nod to legitimacy there as to if you actually got somebody in an armbar, there's not going to be a 30-second struggle for the ropes. Your arm's either going to break or you're going to quit. Tap or snap, right? And so, but it was a really good match. And of course, under the rules of the TV title, it's done under high-speed conditions. So 15-minute time limit, and it was done full speed ahead. It was done beautifully, very well executed. Zack Sabre Jr. has his first singles championship.
I completely forgot he never had a singles championship.
There's something going on after that we're going to get to in just a moment, but talk about this match a little bit, Jeremy. How this one make you feel? Because this one was another compliment to the show. This was worked very differently than everything that had been on the show before.
This was my second favorite match on the show, or my favorite match of the undercard. Is the better way to put it. I have very complex emotions about the and feelings about the main event matches. So I'm just going to say, of the undercard matches, this was far and away my favorite going into it. I wanted to see, and when I came out, I was not disappointed. I felt like there was a very strong possibility that Ren Narita was going to win this match. He did not. Cody Rhodes Sabre Jr. actually won this match with his new bleached look, which is, indicative of a new chapter in Zack Sabre Jr.'s life. So he's got a lot of new things going on. But Ren Narita, if it's not time for him to win the title, the chase is going to be a lot of fun. He has a lot of potential. A lot of people are looking right at Shota Umino right now. And I feel like Ren Narita and Yota Tsuji are the ones that I want to put my money on. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of the former Young Lions come back from excursion and compete for this thing. And Narita is going to hold this title eventually. I think Narita is going to hold a lot of titles eventually. So it's fine. The thing is, Zack is always going to provide a really good match. And it's similar to the a smaller version of Chris Jericho holding the AEW title. You put it on somebody that everyone takes seriously. That will help them take the belt seriously. And perhaps the worry was that if it were Narita, you'd be like, well, that's the kid's belt. It's the toy belt. But if Zack holds the thing for a while and then Narita wins it from him and overcomes that, well, then now we've got a championship that really means something. And I think that's the goal overall there, is to just give it that air of legitimacy off the bat.
We go back and forth about, the first person to hold the title is the level of legitimacy that title will have. So if you put it on Ren Narita, okay, you've slotted it at a certain point because his prestige isn't high enough. You put it on Zack Sabre Jr., the prestige is there. It looked like you've won a World Series ring for a belt, or like it looks like an 8-bit graphic belt. It's an odd belt. Yeah. And I was trying to visualize Zack putting it on, and I just wasn't quite having it. And then we got to the rest of the stuff. So let's talk about the post-match stuff.
Well, certainly. And I just want to mention that my prediction on this was wrong. I also thought I thought they were going to give it to Narita and just have it be the young person's title. But the fact that they are putting it on Zack means that they do I guess they felt like it needed a little bit more.
100% though, Ren Narita did not lose anything by losing this match.
No. And I'm looking forward to the next time he wrestles Zack for sure. So now we did have an angle after this one. So Mikey Nicholls and Shane Haste came down to the ring afterwards. Now, this makes a little bit of historic sense. Zack mentioned, as Suzuki-gun was breaking up, his former faction, that he was in Pro Wrestling Noah when he first encountered Suzuki-gun, and they made him utterly miserable for months at a time before they saw something in Zack and asked him to join. Okay. Some of his allies in those battles with Suzuki-gun before Zack joined were Mikey Nicholls and Shane Haste, TMDK. So, with that in mind, Zack's now a free agent. TMDK came down to the ring, offered him the t-shirt. He briefly and just jokingly, not seriously at all, teased the idea of throwing it into the crowd. He pretty much put it on right away and accepted the invitation. So the first free agent domino fell right there. Zack Sabre Jr. is now a member of TMDK, and I'd imagine will be the #1 singles guy in it now that Jonah has returned to WWE. Interesting to note, Jonah tweeted out that
part of the plan?
This was the plan all along, which,
sure.
Fine. Of course it was. But no, it's a good spot for him, isn't it? And absolutely. Just so you don't have to do it. I'm going to stay right here. Jeremy Finestone, my co-host, called this one.
Feels so good.
Called that would exactly be almost down to the angle. He almost got the angle exactly right. Yeah, what can you say, Jeremy? This was something that you saw coming. You felt this was the best spot for Zack. Can you tell us a little bit about why, and maybe why Ghetto agreed with you?
It just, a merger made the most sense. There's a lot of new guys and so much unaffiliated talent. Bad Dude Tito and the Mighty Don't Kneel really have a lot of potential. And now if you have Zack Sabre Jr. with a link to these guys, maybe we'll see him stateside coming in and doing some rounds with New Japan Strong, in a 4-way and tags and so on and so forth. But you still got Taichi, you got Lance Archer, you got Bad Dude Tito. We don't know Bad Dude Tito's with these guys, but we're going into it, and we just have this turnover and this churn, and between the two factions, which kind of run in parallel to each other in terms of their mentality and their approach to wrestling, it just felt like if you're gonna tear them down, it would make some sense to align and a united front in some way, shape, or form. And it looks like Ghetto's like, yeah, that's what I would do too.
This is not the end of Noah's influence on this show either, by the way. Pro Wrestling Noah would end up having quite the presence at Wrestle Kingdom. So that moves on, and this is a good point to stop and mention this. Each of these matches are quite different from one another. The women's match was very stiff and very fast-paced. They hit each other very, very hard. The TV tournament final was like grappler, striker, technical fest. Bishamon and FTR, we mentioned a little bit in flash, and was a little bit in fast forward, but a lot of terrific near falls we saw in that one. We moved into something different. The next match was for the NEVER Openweight title, Karl Anderson against Tama Tonga. One thing we hadn't seen is just almost a classic American asshole heel versus the underdog babyface role. And that's how they decided to work this match. And I actually, Jeremy, this was the match I anticipated the least. We've talked about over the months that the Karl Anderson saga wore us down more than it interested us as to whether or not he was going to come back and defend the title or drop the title, all that kind of thing. Karl Anderson makes the deal to not only wrestle Hikuleo at the tag team tournament finals, but also to come here to Wrestle Kingdom and take on Tama Tonga. We suspected that, of course, none of this was being done particularly out of the goodness of anyone's heart in Stamford, Connecticut, but this was going to be allowed to happen. We did not think that it was any harbinger of anything to come, so we suspected that this was going to be Anderson coming back to simply drop the title that he held when he signed with WWE, that they were at least going to allow him to come back and drop it. What I liked about this, Jeremy, is that they at least worked it in an interesting way. It wasn't just a match there. What they did was they have Anderson hit Tama Tonga with a belt upside the head before it starts. He goes on this blitzkrieg where he suplexes Tama Tonga in a good-looking spot so that he hit his head on the rail outside the ring. They set Tama Tonga up like he's just been devastated before the match. He's been hit with a belt. He's been dropped on the ring, on the rail. Then the match is kind of starting. He hits the Bernard driver on the ramp. Tama looks dead, looks toast. And yet, when he tried the rest of the match, when Anderson tried for the gun stun on the ramp, Tama shoved him off. The rest of the match was Tama just barely hanging on while this asshole heel would do everything he could to stop him up. There wasn't a whole lot of offense from Tama until the big comeback right there. And I thought this was actually decent heel work from Anderson. In the end, it was just worked differently from everything else. Anderson puts over Tama Tonga, even hugged him in the post-match.
That infuriated me. That infuriated me.
Yeah. And then, but I mean, in the end, I thought it was a fairly decent, just underdog story. These two aren't going to be able to compete with what is going to come later here. So at least they did something other than that and just had the babyface get left so far behind, and he has to come back from so far, but he manages to overcome that mountain a little bit. At least there was an underdog story to this one, because they're not going to have a Kenny Omega Will Ospreay match. They're not going to be able to do what Ren and Zack are able to do, but I thought they did what they're able to do, and they do a good example of it. That was my thought on this one. I know you weren't as excited about it as I was, but considering
I call this our long international nightmare being over, my friend.
Oh, jeez. Oh, jeez.
Okay, so I felt like I watched a different match than you. I wanted, in all honesty, I wanted Tama Tonga to shock pin and beat Karl Anderson very, very quickly, based off of just everything that's going on, rebuilding the Never Openweight title, the angle going into it where he actually got guns done with his own move. There was all these factors going into play that I wasn't into it. And then lead up to this, Fightful had an interview with Rocky Romero that just said the negotiations were stressful and fraught with peril for this whole time and trying to make this work. And, Rocky's putting himself out there because he vouched for Karl and doing all this stuff. So all of this business that we're getting comes to this match. And I'm watching it, and I'm distinctly noticing Karl Anderson isn't taking any bumps for the first 8 minutes of this match. He's literally taken one back bump on the ramp for the first 8 minutes of this match, and he's just getting this. I get that, but it doesn't do much for me when I'm watching this, and I'm just like, can we just move on from I'm already annoyed about the whole thing, so I'm not really forgiving of it going into it, and so I just want it to be over. I get that clouds my entire perception of this match, and it is not objective whatsoever. But I do really feel that the Never Openweight title has been distinctly underserved by this whole thing, and this match didn't do anything to really recover the prestige that's been lost from the title, even from the point that Jay White and Ishii were fighting over it earlier in 2022. So that's where I'm at. Am I glad that they were able to get through this match, even though that was an awful gun stun at the very end that Karl Anderson kind of bury me softly, brother. It wasn't a great gunk done. There are things that I could go down the list and say dot, 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 dot. But that would probably make me supremely unpopular or popular with some people who like that sort of thing, which I'm not going to do. With that said, I am glad that the title's on Tama Tonga. I am glad that Karl Anderson and WWE were able to make it work with New Japan and they were to have this match. Do I want this scenario to play out ever again? God, no. Really don't. And so that's my fear of seeing something like this happen again, and it's going to give me PTSD.
I'm really puzzled by the hostility toward Anderson because from my end of it, he went back to New Japan. He was not under contract to WWE when he went to New Japan. Gedo decided to put the Never Openweight title on him to make it part of this story with Tama Tonga because, of course, they were two of the founding members of Bullet Club in the first place. Karl Anderson and Doc Gallows were the ones that knocked Tama Tonga out of Bullet Club. This whole story has kind of revolved around both the founding and Tama Tonga's ejection from the group.
Sure.
In that time, he gets an offer from WWE that is for more money than he's had. He's not under contract with New Japan. And instead of just putting the belt in a box and shipping it back to Japan, he wants to drop it the right way in the ring. And this is something that has been going on in wrestling for a long time, that when things can be worked out, you drop the title on the way out. And instead of just shipping it back and just saying, I'm too important for this now, so to speak, he actually worked out a deal with WWE. And I'm sure that he had to do a lot of work to do it. And just say, I would like to, this is the company where I cut my teeth. This is the company that made me, basically. I mean, Karl Anderson was heavily associated with New Japan before he went to the WWE. He wanted to drop the belt in the ring. And yes, Triple H and WWE made that very difficult and left New Japan in the lurch, but that's not Karl Anderson's fault. To me, Karl Anderson just wanted to drop the damn belt in the ring. And so the whole thing, like Karl Anderson didn't declare, I mean, he did in character, but Karl Anderson didn't say, I'm not going to Autumn Attack, I'm going to go to Saudi Arabia. He got told to go to Saudi Arabia. And believe me, I think he would have rather been at Autumn Attack, considering some of his other trips to Saudi Arabia. So this hostility toward Anderson puzzles me. To me, all the guy did was do the right thing, drop the belt in the ring, put over the guy who's going to go forward as a new baby face, put over the guy that he stabbed in the back, and then go back to WWE. And everyone is just, well, not everyone, but I know you are, and a lot of people are just mad at him for being in character, which is what he's supposed to do. He's supposed to act like an asshole. He's supposed to act like an asshole.
Said is objectively true. Objectively true. You are not incorrect. However, there are a couple of factors that I would like to just throw in there that subjectively have clouded my judgment. I have not, to this point, or in the very recent past, seen Karl Anderson at the level of holding a singles title of that caliber at the time that he won it. I was surprised that they belted him. I was surprised that he continued to hold on to the belt. I did not think that he was like someone that they should be investing in New Japan, especially since he wasn't under contract. And then you go down the list that we had of people that were in the Rambo and all these options, and people that we could have done here, there, or anywhere, or done the Never thing. I get that it had to be a Bullet Club. I get that there were links to this. But my whole thing has always been, really? All of this for Karl Anderson? And that's it. That was really like, it was just like my talent valuation of Karl Anderson was like, I would not go to this level of effort to make this work, but it's not my company.
With him, I understand the point with Gallows because I do see a lot of flaws in Luke Gallows' game. I mean, he's got the personality part of it. That team isn't fantastic, I don't think, and a lot of it is due to Gallows. I do think Anderson is a good wrestler. I think he can have good matches. Here's another point that I wanted to make. I was thinking about this not too long ago. It was a podcast years ago. So we're talking like when Anderson and Gallows first left New Japan with AJ and Nakamura, and they all went over to WWE within about a month or so after Wrestle Kingdom. And, AJ showed up at Royal Rumble and blah, blah, blah. And Nakamura came into NXT not long after that. I believe they were doing Jericho's podcast. Of course, AEW didn't exist then, so they could do each other's podcasts easier. And I remember some story right there that I think it was Jericho telling it, where he was talking to Gedo, and Gedo was booking a card or something, and he pointed at Anderson and said, "That's my guy." And he was just like, "What?" And he just said, "If I need a good match, I go with him." And remember, Anderson actually made a G1 final. You know, when the year Goto won it, he was in the G1 final.
But 2011, 2012?
I understand subjectively. I think it might have been before that. Might have been, but yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
I understand your point about, is he that big of a star that we're going to go through all these machinations? It only matters if one guy thinks he is.
And he did.
And he did. And for some reason, Gedo is just kind of enamored of him. And I'm not even saying he's wrong. I think Anderson can have good matches if he's in with the right people. And he was somebody that was always kind of handled with care in New Japan. So I think that's why they decided to go with him. They wanted to get Tama Tonga going, and this was a guy that Gedo trusted to get him there. And for whether you agree with that or not, that's subjective, and I understand. But if you're wondering why in the world are we going to Karl Anderson from this, it's because the New Japan booker Gedo, for some reason, sees a lot in him and trusts him. And perhaps it's just as simple as he does it exactly the way Gedo wants him to do it. I don't know.
The guy with the book walks him. Great, got it.
Yeah. All right,
and that's as valid a reason as anything.
Now tell me why you were pissed off about the hug afterward. I'm very curious about this because the way he did it was kind of magnanimous and said, "Hey, you beat me. There you go." I guess
I don't know.
Sportsmanship on the way out.
All this stuff and the Bullet Club and all that, just I don't know. It just felt like they were breaking character, but I hadn't watched the whole clip. But it was just one of those like, okay, sure. I guess you're a face in WWE now, so it's okay to like lift the veil and do whatever. But it was just the whole thing was tainted with a bad taste in my mouth from the get-go. So I was inclined to not like it, and I am going to own that. And
I wanted to make sure I give you your say about that. That's fair enough. And yeah. I'm curious to see the backstage comments translated and all that. Of course, theirs doesn't need to be translated. They're speaking English, but I am very curious to see backstage comments. Some things happen there. And that leads us to this next match, because this next match leads to more backstage shenanigans. So
shenanigans.
We had the Great Muta's final match in New Japan Pro Wrestling not too long ago, but that's not the end of it, is it? Because we have to have Keiji Muto's final match in New Japan. So, of course, this is his other persona, more himself this time. And he's coming off a couple days earlier, a big performance against Shinsuke Nakamura on a Noah show. And here we have Muto's final New Japan match. It is Tetsuya Naito, Sanada, and Bushi from the LIJ faction taking on Muto. And then two generations of this, what I feel is the same type of character. You have Hiroshi Tanahashi, the ultimate, babyface, and Shota Umino, who I think they want to be the next Tanahashi. We'll see if he gets there. But I think this match was telling a lot of that story and New Japan's intentions toward that future. So, a lot of layers to this, right, Jeremy? Sanada was, of course, given his start by Muto. Chris Charlton did a wonderful job on commentary, as always. So did Kevin Kelly. Gino Gambino back on English commentary, which was fun to hear. And a couple of guests, too, that were terrific. We'll get to all that. But Sanada was turned down by New Japan at first, went to, I believe it was All Japan, and or it was either All Japan or Noah. Sorry, Chris.
It was All Japan, and then he ended up in Wrestle 1 at some point.
There you go. Thank you very much. But Muto was the guy that saw something in Sanada and agreed to go ahead and train him. So those two started off the match. Sanada, gives him the symbol, the Muto symbol, and then hits a drop kick to the knee, and they start building to things. And, Muto, let's see, he even did a Muto moonsault on Muto. Of course, that's his style of moonsault, is the classic Muto version. Sanada was having the time of his life here. He was bumping for Muta. He was giving him his own moves right there. We're talking
very happy to be doing this match.
Basement drop kicks, shining wizards. And I think Sanada was just really kind of living a bit of a dream right here, working with the guy that started him, somebody that he considers an idol. And, Muto, again, it's similar to Tatsumi Fujinami, where he's smart enough to do very little, but do it just right and in a good spot. I thought most of what Muto did looked well. His body's shot. His knees are destroyed. I think his hips are too, from that matter.
There was a point that I noticed in this match, right, where he's moving fine, and then the match ends, and he does the leap out of the ring, and all of a sudden he's old and he cannot move.
That adrenaline can do wonders, as they say. But the match was just simple 6-man tag where everybody gets a little bit of shine here. But they did give a lot to Muto. You can tell that everybody on LIJ was excited to be working with him. But in the end, the Shining Wizard was hit on Bushi, but it was Shota Umino who put the Death Rider on Bushi and got the win. Now, this isn't the kind of monster win it would have been if it were Sonata or if it were Naito. But I think it was a message sent that Shota Umino was the one that got the 3 count. Mm-hmm. There's very little doubt in my mind that they want Umino to be the next Tanahashi. And by putting him in there next to Tanahashi with the all-time legend and having him get the pin, I think that was a clear message that the fans or the crowd should, they're hoping, get behind this guy because the company's behind him.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think this was a past, present, and future kind of thing with LIJ getting their flowers as opponents of Muto in the past. 10 years ago, Naito in 2012, I think, had a match with Muto at a Wrestle Kingdom. So, like, there's history, there's history there. Just generally just a fun match. I will say it is incredibly amusing to me that the entrances of this match was longer than some matches and segments before that happened. Like, there was a lot of entrance time in this match. Well, okay, a lot.
Naito is the human rain delay, right? With his entrance in the first place. And Naito always takes his time getting into the ring. Sonata is never in any particular hurry. And Tanahashi and Muto's knees are such that it's going to take them a long time to get anywhere. So the only 2 people that were particularly ambulatory in this thing were Bushi and Shota, and their position in their team is such that they can't go to the ring before the other 2 do. So we were really kind of stuck. It's a little bit like when you're walking through the mall with your grandparents and you have to wait for them because they're not moving too quick, and you just want to get to the arcade.
So that was somewhat amusing for the pacing of the show. Was that this was definitely like, we didn't have an intermission in this show, but there was a definitive like, okay, we are on the second half of this show coming with this match, because this was a lot of spectacle. This was very similar to the Inoki match in the pre-show, in which it doesn't feel particularly consequential on the whole, but the spotlight given to it gave it prominence. One of the matches it kind of reminded me of was the WrestleMania match with The Rock and Mick Foley versus Evolution.
Okay.
Like, they're the young and the old and giving the rub and generally just trying to, put the future in prominence by putting it on stage with all these levels of top level talent in the past.
Well, and it was a definite a signal toward Shota Umino, and it was, like you said, this was the turning point in this show here. And I wanted to bring this up here. I'm looking off to for those of you who are watching on video. I wanted to look at the times of matches, and it's not so much the particular numbers that matter, but the junior heavyweight tag match, 10 minutes, 29 seconds, 5:47 for the IWGP women's title match. The heavyweight match, 10:10, 10:32 for the title for the title establishment of the TV title, 9:36 for the Never Openweight, 9:20 in this one. So this is the last match that did not have a long time slot allotted to it, and it was sort of the transition into the key matches of the evening. And before we get to those key matches, it's worth mentioning something that I think is going to play a very big part in New Japan storylines going forward. After each match, the participants do a little bit of a promo. It's the closest thing, because you don't get a lot of microphone time in New Japan, only if you win the main event. So backstage comments become the time where they can do their promos, and that appears on New Japan World. And LIJ were at their little backstage comment area and doing their post-match talk when they were confronted by members of the Noah roster. And this is a group called Congo in Noah. And there is a wonderful wrestler named Keno who leads that faction. There's also Katsuhiko Nakajima, terrific wrestler, Tadasuke, Hajime Ohara, High 69 is another guy in there. And this is a really good faction. Now, we saw a little bit of a taste of this, Jeremy, back at Wrestle Kingdom in January when they had the Noah versus New Japan show right there, which I believe is for the Japanese Red Cross, if I remember right, a little benefit show there. Mm-hmm. And here's the confrontation. So that was my favorite match on that show, was the LIJ match against, and there was a lot of good stuff on that show, but I really enjoyed that. It seemed like everyone was having a really good time and working with each other, and it was very brisk, fast paced. You could see that everyone was into it. So if they want to make this a bit of a program, I'm very much on board. Now, we were tipped off a little bit by Chris Samsa last week, guest on our show, that mentioned that there could be a bit of an invasion going on. Now, a lot of people suspected it was going to come from All Japan. Instead, it comes from Noah, but it's a group of wrestlers that are very, very good. And it does give us something that Naito really didn't have, which is a fresh set of opponents going forward. And so I'm excited about this to see where it goes. It could be part of New Year's Dash tomorrow. Again, New Year's Dash, no information. We're not going to know.
Mystery Vortex.
Not going to know what happens until they get to the ring, until the music plays for them to come to the ring. Could be part of that. Could be part of the Yokohama show. Nothing announced for that at all. So what did you think about this when you saw that there was a bit of an invasion going on backstage while the main match was in the ring?
Okay. I'll tell you what we thought. When Charlton said that there was a backstage altercation, we immediately thought it was Omega and the Bucks, and Omega and FTR got into a fight with each other.
Did you really?
Like we were like, did no, and then
did you really?
We were scanning Twitter, and then, because like they're talking about it, like what are there's still like a little bit of like PTSD of like can everybody just act like adults kind of thing. So
well, but if that actually happened backstage, there's no way on earth anyone on that broadcast says anything.
Stephen Conway, let me stop you right there. It was 2:30 in the goddamn morning.
Okay, all right.
We're not exactly like at the peak of like alertness and just like thinking things through. I mean, we're not getting drunk or anything. There's no alcohol, but it's 2:30 in the morning, and we're just like, what did he just say about a brawl? And so you're scanning Twitter and you're trying to figure it out, and then you're like, oh no, it's an angle for probably Wrestle Kingdom in the 21st or whatever. And then you're just like, okay, what do we got? And then the cooler head prevailed. I'm like, oh, that'll be cool, But there was literally just like a moment of like, did things go completely off the rails here? And then you wanted to know.
I did pop when Gino Gambino said, "Oh, what did Kenny do now?"
That was exactly like, So there was this like line of thinking that was like already propagating us in that direction, and then we found out, and then we're just kind of like, is this going to be the Wrestle Kingdom at the Yokohama Arena, that kind of thing? And then, so we're going to find out. The Vortex tonight, we got no information about upcoming events other than a title challenge on February 1st that we will get to shortly. But other than that, this was Wrestle Kingdom, and what happened on Wrestle Kingdom was the only thing that mattered at Wrestle Kingdom.
So from there, we moved on to the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title match.
Good match.
The show took a distinct turn here, and everything ratcheted up because this match was fantastic. So we had 4 really excellent wrestlers here. Now, like we mentioned before, 3 made men. Hiromu Takahashi, Taiji Ishimori, the champion going into this match, and El Desperado. All 3 legit well-established junior heavyweight champions, and Master Wato. And we were wondering if Master Wato was going to take this opportunity and step up. He didn't have to win. He just had to hang with these guys, and his career would change. And our position was that he had been showing signs of really stepping up, and perhaps he was ready to make the leap. I am not dissuaded from that after watching this four-way match. Master Wato was not carried. He was right in there with three of the very best in the world. He had a fantastic match. Signature dives for everybody. Of course, it's a four-way, so it was worked beautifully among these men, but it was signature moves, big moves, breaking up each other's pinfalls, various little ways where they would opportunistically double team someone and then turn on each other, but all done in a fairly logical way, as much as you can with something like this, where sometimes people would work together when it would benefit them, and then sometimes they would sneak attack somebody when it would benefit them. I just have a few notes on this thing here. Wato let go of that pin combination where he hoists people up and drives them into a crucifix to go for his big dive off the ropes.
We were so angry at him.
Desperado held him up there. Ishimori moved in, and they all took a big dive, big fall after that. So that was when it looked like Wato was about to win this thing. Hiromu hit a time bomb on Desperado, but he managed to kick out of that. And a very good near fall. Wato had a gorgeous flying uppercut, that thing where he kind of springboards and then hits an uppercut on the guy. He was absolutely flying on that one. Just got all kinds of air and just very graceful, actually. And then hit that. I believe they call it the Recidiamente on Desperado, but Ishimori pulled the ref out of the ring in another incredibly near fall. So there were a couple of times when you thought, oh, damn, Wato is going to win this thing, only to have it pulled out from him at the last possible moment.
When Ishimori pulled the ref out, I was like, he's not winning this now.
Right. Yeah. That was to say it would have happened by now. But then Ishimori ended up clocking Wato in the back with a chair from behind because the referee was recovering from being yanked out of the ring, because that 4-foot drop is just devastating to referees. And then
it's the dizziness on the fall, man. You go down and you have the vertigo. You just need a moment to collect yourself. You haven't been there. You don't know until you try it.
The sudden change in altitude can be very disturbing. Absolutely. So they threw the ref back in. Once he was back at the original altitude, then everything cleared in his head and he was fine. Ishimori then went for the bloody cross, but didn't quite get it. Recidiamente on Ishimori from Wato, but Hiromu broke that up. So this was one of those things where every time someone would hit a big move, your eyes would start scanning around to see who was coming in to break this thing up. And they would just come from all kinds of different directions. It was so much fun. It had a lot of energy. It never really slowed down at all. And it was almost 17 minutes. I wrote my notes here. Wato is absolutely stepping up. The finish came when Wato had a gorgeous German suplex with a bridge on Hiromu Takahashi, but when Hiromu kicked out, he managed to maneuver himself and counter into a time bomb 2 on Wato and get the pinfall. So Hiromu Takahashi, for the 5th time, is the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Champion. I think this match accomplished everything you wanted to do. It was a thrilling match. It was very well worked. The belt is on somebody that New Japan trusts to move forward, and I think Master Wato accomplished his mission of having the big match and hanging with some of the best in the world. And I do feel like this could change the perception of Wato moving forward in a positive way. What are your thoughts?
Wato can hang. He's not as good as the other 3, but he will be someday. That's my general takeaway of everything that I saw in that match. He looked great. He belonged. It was unfortunate that all the things happened to Kushida that gave Wato the opportunity to be in this match. But Wato didn't miss when he had a chance to shoot. So I give him all the credit in the world. I was surprised that Hiromu won this match. But I'm totally okay with it. And now, after I'm looking at this picture, all I really want to see is Hiromu versus Lio Rush.
Hiromu versus Lio Rush, Hiromu versus Francesco Akira down the road. That's not yet, but I think that's.
But there's a Super Junior tournament coming up in 4 months, and if Hiromu's the champion, there's a lot of opportunities there for some very magical matchups.
Wato is in there, and they need Wato to step up. I mean, Kushida, it's wonderful to have Kushida back, and we're definitely looking forward to him being at full health, and because he's another guy that can absolutely hang with any of these men. We know that. Mm-hmm. He's also about 40 years old. He's not going to do that forever. And so they need that younger guy coming up. They need Wato to be like that, just like they kind of need Shota Umino to be that pure babyface guy. They're the guy that could someday lead Hantai. They're going to need that junior version of that. Taguchi is getting older. Kushida is getting older. That young babyface junior. And if Wato can step into that role, there is a lot of room at the top there for him.
He definitely has the opportunity to be the flag bearer for a new generation of junior heavyweight talent in New Japan.
But it's also fair to say he still has a little bit of ways to go. He's not quite on those three level, but again, he's a lot younger than those three. So,
but he was brought in at a time where they weren't bringing a whole lot of other young lions, so they were confident in him at the time when they did it, and they have carried him along and developed him, and now it's time to let him like fly on his own. And right now, it's looking pretty good for him.
Now we can come on to the double main event. So we can move on to that. And we saw something very special, I feel, in the U.S. title match between Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega. Will Ospreay came in as the champion. Don Callis joined the English commentary and was fantastic. And it really reminded me that the one thing that I was unfortunate about the whole AEW happening is that we lost Don Callis regularly on commentary. We got Chris Charlton. I think Kevin Kelly and Chris Charlton are the best team in the business. But it reminds you just how good Callis is as a talker right here. And, because he hasn't been on AEW, we was missing from AEW the whole time Omega was gone. So, he's back now and you're starting to see him, but man, he was good in this. This match between these two told an amazing story, but more than that was just an athletic marvel between two guys that are brilliant at this form of athletic storytelling. And I have 2 pages of notes that I'm not going to read, Jeremy. It's just move. But this thing carried with you the emotions of this match. Kenny was taking apart Will Ospreay early. And then they just started this back and forth thing that just had so much emotion toward it. And I'm just trying to figure out a way to explain how this match made me feel, except that I got caught up in the ebb and flow of it in a way that very few matches have made me feel as an adult. When I was a little kid, you would live and die with everything, right? Because you're just having fun with it and you're jumping up and down in the living room and all that. And I wasn't doing that. I'm a little old for that now. 1 year older than that now, as a matter of fact, as of today. But this match absolutely took me for an emotional ride. There were some moves that scared the crap out of me. And they absolutely beat the living tar out of each other. There was, some table spots where these guys, Kenny Omega jumping off the apron with a table lying on Will and smashing through the table into Will's kidneys, which couldn't have been pleasant. There was suplex on that table while it was laying flat with the doggone brackets up. Not the flat part of it that Kenny ended up taking. There was a sky twister press on the floor to Kenny. But more than that, it were these little moments throughout the match where these two would just look at each other and glare at each other, and you could see the story here that Kenny says, I'm still the guy. And Will has been telling us that he's the new guy ever since Kenny left, right? That was part of why he turned on Okada. He was being held back. He's the man now. And this whole story was that Kenny is like, no, you're not. You were a lesser version of me the whole time I was gone. But now the king's back. Ospreay insists that he's the new king. And you could see that both of them were playing this like they truly believed that. And the battle of wills between the two was pretty breathtaking. Going over it move for move isn't going to do it, Jeremy. How did this match make you feel?
So I'm going to ask you this. Did you watch that YouTube press conference between them, the 18 minutes with Ospreay, Omega, and Callis? Yes. Did you watch that?
Yes. Yeah, I watched the press conference. Yeah.
So I was already white hot for this match before that press conference. And then that press conference happened, and Callis was unreal with stealing the tears God was crying when Omega left in 2018. It was raining because God was crying. Oh, man. I was like, I saw it coming, and I was just like, God damn it, Callis. God damn you son of a bitch. You did it. You did it. And then you had Ospreay go in there and rip him apart for the assumptions of what it must have been like for him doing what he was doing in New Japan. And you've heard Ospreay talk about it in the past, but you haven't seen it like tangibly just written all over his body, like the emotion that he carried. There was some exercising of some demons in this match, it felt like, for both of them. With the way that Kenny left in 2018. The night that he left was the night that Will debuted the Hidden Blade and concussed Kota Ibushi. Both was supposed to happen in storyline, and then it happened in real life that he concussed him, and he was supposed to be cornering Kenny that night. It didn't happen. There's truth and fiction all tied together, like the most magnificent of wrestling stories. Then when they got out there, the aura and the vibe that Kenny Omega has when he is in New Japan is diametrically different than the aura that he has in AEW. There's a bit too much cuteness. There's a bit too much of like, oh, gee, shucks, kind of smiling baby face. Like, I got to appeal to as many people as possible. This Kenny Omega is a very deliberate, very specific wrestler designed to do one thing, and it is to carry the promotion of New Japan, which has different priorities than AEW. And when he came out here, he felt like the Kenny Omega that I haven't seen in a very, very, very long time. He felt like he felt like a refreshed Kenny Omega. And if you think about it, I looked this up. This is his 5th singles match since All Out 2021, where he wrestled Christian Cage.
Okay.
Since then, he wrestled Alan Angels. He wrestled Hangman Page. He took a considerable amount of time off. He had this Shino match on Dark. And then he had this one, a 33-minute, clearly above 5-star match. And this dude has had 5 single matches in the last year and a half.
So let's go over some of this.
That's unreal.
As I lost my voice a little bit there. And so, pardon me there. There were a few spots on this that really drove it home. There was a dragon suplex off the top that Will landed on his feet. He then managed to do, I'm not crying, I promise, for those of you listening at home.
Well, I mean, I'm heavy with emotion about this match, too. So it's okay of all times to be really caught up in the moment. Because goddamn, 33 minutes of magic. And it is your birthday. So you are allowed to be choked up on your birthday.
No.
About
I'm not
special moments.
I'm not choked up. I just lost. So
there it is.
But the dragon suplex from Kenny off the top, Will ends up landing on his feet. He hits a Robinson special for a near fall. And then there was this, he puts they used to call it the Cheeky Nando's kick. That's the one where Kenny is standing facing the turnbuckle. Will pulls his head down so that they appear to be stuck with their head kind of wedged against the top turnbuckle. Now, this is an unprotected turnbuckle, which added another layer of danger to it because somebody, I guess it was Kenny or something, took the pad off.
He took it all off early, about 5 or 10 minutes in.
Cheeky Nando's kicks, this thing, so he gets it so that he's wedged down there. His head is just wide open, and then he just starts laying in these super kicks, and Will laid them in. And I think one of those, I don't know. I mean, there were a lot of stiff blows in this match, started to shut one of Kenny's eyes. And I think it was there, but it could have been something else because these guys were hitting each other hard. You mentioned exercising some demons. I think a lot of that pent up frustration, anger with the last couple of years for both of them, whether it's injury or fighting ways through a pandemic, and even both of them acknowledging at various times, bouts of depression and issues and things. I mean, this match seemed to be some sort of physical catharsis for the two of them. Yeah. And they took it out on one another. And then I just had this note. I love this one. Holy Christ, a DDT from the top turnbuckle to the unprotected top rope.
That was nuts.
That looked incredible. And now it's the middle of the night here. It had to be like 5 a.m. or something like that. And I was sure that I woke up my poor girlfriend because I just popped up. I just went, holy shit. And that was so dangerous. But Will was fine. He did what we believe to be a blade job there because he was kind of surrounded by the rest of United Empire for a bit. Couldn't see him. And then when he comes up, he's bleeding buckets. But this was one where the juice works. You know, there are times in wrestling when a nice and neat little well done blade job can help. And I think this is definitely one of them. Kenny, there's the picture right there. You're looking at it if you're on the YouTube thing. There was a tope con hilo from Kenny that was gorgeous. Very few people do it as graceful and as perfectly as he does. He hits one in this one. Kenny set the table leaning against the rail and just bashes Will's head right through it. That was not a work. He was just headbutting the shit out of that table until he broke right through it. This was violent. It was emotional. It was... Will kind of did the zombie Will thing where his face kind of goes blank and his eyes look very glassy, but he's just waiting for the right time to pounce. And then at the end, it was Will continually trying to get the Stormbreaker and just kept finding ways to run smack into vicious V triggers from Kenny. And in the end, Will ducked a clothesline, floated over and hit a Liger bomb in one fluid motion. There were certain things in this match that you realize that maybe 4 people in the world can do.
100%.
And these two are 2 of them that can do stuff like this. This is a half an hour into this match too, by the way. They're doing stuff like this.
They completely dismantled a table. Like over and over and over again, they used it for multiple things. They exposed the metal side and did a couple of moves that I thought actually concussed Kenny when it happened. There were a lot of things in this match that were like, we talked about Kota and Naito a couple weeks ago and the level of like brutality. And I was like, I hope it doesn't come to that. It came close. It came uncomfortably close to that level of just, you guys are pushing some envelopes here.
Now, let's get into this because this isn't some backyard hardcore match where they're actually just crushing each other. That's not really what was going on. They were working very stiff, and there were some moves that were risky. But most of the hidden blades, which is, of course, just that elbow to either the back or the front, he did it both ways, to Kenny's head, were very well worked and were done very carefully and very professionally. And the V triggers were very well done, to where they sounded horrendous and they looked good. But if you saw what he was doing, he's kicking Will's chest, not his face. So these are 2 highly skilled professionals that just decided that we are going to go out and steal this damn show, come hell or high water. And this is going to be one of the hardest shows in the world to steal this year, right? So the whole thing is trying to get One Winged Angel, trying to get Stormbreaker, hitting Hidden Blade over and over again, hitting the V trigger. So again, just because not everybody might be totally up on this, the Hidden Blade I mentioned is the elbow, running elbow to either the back of the head or to the face. Yeah, the exposed elbow. And of course, the V trigger are just vicious knees, just running knees that Kenny says. So these guys are sprinting across the ring at each other and hitting these big strikes. Will even hits a damn Styles Clash. And that was a brilliant little moment right there. And Kenny is barely
I had the brilliant moment that they saved for the very, very end of this match.
Oh, yeah. And so Stormbreaker was countered into another V trigger, but Will hit another Hidden Blade. Kenny is hanging on to the wrist for dear life. They go into another Bushido contest where we're just going to forearm the living hell out of each other for a little while. Kenny countered that into a straitjacket German that looked incredible. And again, we're talking like 35 minutes into a match that did not have long headlock spots in it. The cardio on these guys are amazing. Jeremy, talk about the finish for this one, because there was a novel in a 3-move sequence that they played out for us. So for the folks listening, for the folks watching, tell us how this thing ended. It was
all right.
It was
so
art.
I have the main 2 moves that did. I don't remember what led into the golden trigger, but so he'd done his Poison Rana V trigger a couple of times throughout the match, but he eventually got to the point where Omega had Ospreay in total wrist control, and he looked down at him and he said, and I think he said this is for Kota, and he gave him the golden trigger, and Will just took it like he knew he was had. Yeah. And then Omega lifted it up for the One Winged Angel. And this was the thing that I asked everybody in the room. Does Will Ospreay kick out of the One Winged Angel? And not a single person hesitated to say no. And so when that One Winged Angel went up, You knew exactly where it was going, and he hit it, and it was done. And everybody who exhaled when that 3 count was done knew that they had seen something special. If you haven't seen this match and you have opinions about it, you need to be quiet until you watch this match.
Go see it. This one was special. And the story there, you mentioned Kota Ibushi getting a concussion in the match with Will. That came back because, of course, Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi will always be forever linked in wrestling. The emotion of that, Will's defiance in the face of that golden trigger, where he just looked at Kenny and he knew what was going to happen to him. You could see it in his face. He played it like, I know what is happening here, but screw you, you have to do it. You know, and just for him to scoop it up into that one-winged angels, like, I know you got me, but damn it, you got to lift me up and put me away, because I'm just not going to go quietly. This was fantastic. And more than that, we talked about who was going to win this match. And we said, if you can get Kenny for big events for a while, if that can be worked out, this is exactly the correct finish, because Kenny Omega should be Will Ospreay's Mount Everest. This should have to be the hardest thing. More than Okada even. It has to be Kenny. And someday, I don't know if he's ever going to kick out of the one-winged angel. Okada never did. It's the most protected move in wrestling. And they don't even... a lot of opinions there from Jeremy's dogs about this one. But that's quite all right. No problem there. And what you had here, though, is... The one-winged angel is very well protected. Stormbreaker is also very well protected. My feeling through this whole thing was whoever hits it first is going to win the thing. I don't know if they're ever going to kick out of each other's finishers. But what I feel very strongly is that someday Will Ospreay is going to come back and beat Kenny Omega down the road. And when he does, it's going to be the defining moment of Will Ospreay's career. So at that point, you're going to have this story, and they each have other things to do. Of course, there is a story to come someday with Kenny Omega and Jay White. There's a story that's going to come with Will Ospreay trying to climb that mountain again, and there will probably be obstacles put in his way before he can get back to Kenny Omega. But all those things are going to result someday in a rematch between these two that's probably going to be just as epic. So this match was one of the greats, and you should absolutely go out of your way to see it. It is only chapter 1 of what could end up being a historic rivalry in New Japan. So we have all that to come. So that is the U.S. title. Of course, now that's on Kenny Omega, which means we're going to be seeing the U.S. title over in AEW at times, I would have to think. And then we have the great news that Kenny Omega is going to be doing some more matches with New Japan. So we have all that to look forward to, and it's going to be a lot of interesting twists and turns to come on that.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think after saying last week that I thought Jay White, Okada, Ospreay, and Omega were all going to be tied to each other this year, that's all going to be coming true. So, hey, buddy, you're okay. You like Omega too, don't you? Yeah, he does.
A lot of opinions on that one for sure.
Yeah. So they thought it was a 5-star match too.
They did, yes.
Yes.
That gets all the treats. So that brought us to the IWGP World Heavyweight title match between Jay White and Kazuchika Okada. And I remember just saying, like, this might be the only match in the world that can follow the one before.
Yes.
I'm not saying that it's better. It was completely different. I think the match of the night was Will versus Kenny. But man, was this World Heavyweight title match great too. It's Jay White and Okada, and the crowd was a little tired because, believe me, that the fans were into that U.S. title match. That's the other part that I should have mentioned during it. They were riding the wave, and that was as close to a crowd sounding pre-pandemic as we've heard.
100%.
You know, where each move was getting a little bit of reaction. There were chants each way, and there were people cheering every move. It's changed things a little bit. Even the cheering events, their first instinct is to clap because they've been doing that for so long, you know. So, but that was the first one where they really got into it. This one hit on a different level, but this was a brilliant title match. So Jay White goes in as champion. He defeated Okada earlier in the year. Okada, for his part, just sucks it up, wins G1, knowing that that's going to give him the shot at Jay White he feels he needs. He feels he just needs the one. So it goes into this one where Jay White feels like he is fulfilling his own destiny. Like, this is it. This is the guy that I'm going to overcome. Okada is my white whale. I've got him 4 matches to 1. I'm going to finish him now. No one can ever say he's on my level if I go 5-1 against Kazuchika Okada now. I'm the guy. That's the story we're telling. And this had a much slower build than Omega and Ospreay because they're different athletes. And of course, Omega and Ospreay are such phenomenal cardio, and just their move set is totally different than these two. This one was a slower build, but with these two, you have even more a different type of psychology between the two. Jay White, his character is that he's a master manipulator, the master of all the mind games, and he's just talking trash to Okada. He's smirking to the crowd. He does the thing where he tries to get the crowd behind him, kind of knowing that they never will, but just to frustrate him, he does these things. So some classic heel tactics. And we saw more Geto in this one, which kind of surprised me. Geto just flat out jumping up on the apron and interfering a few times. But this match was another one that built and built and built until we got to the point where they started trying to hit their finishers. And Okada actually hit the Okada style drop kick fairly early in this one, which surprised me, Jeremy. That's kind of usually the signal that we're building to the finish. Instead, he pulled it out pretty early, and then there was a nice little gap there. But
he also did a spinning lariat close to the spinning Rainmaker really early in the match and hit it, but nothing tangible came of it. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and we, like I said, more of Geto than usual. Geto doesn't necessarily interfere in matches as much as in Jay White matches, but this one he did, and it worked when it happened. It's not like he was taking away from it, but it was something that you just thought something interesting was going on there, because you just don't see him getting involved like that in these matches. So there were a lot of interesting things here, and again, I could just go over move after move after move, but it's worth your time to watch this one as well. And you just saw where they got to the point where trying to get Rainmakers, trying to get trying to get the, why am I thinking about a Rainmaker into a landslide for a near fall. Jay countered into the Blade Runner. So you have
a lot of Emerald Flosion suplexes and near the end as well. There was a lot of countering psychology. Like you said, it was a diametrically opposed match from the one that happened before it. It was all psychological with the power moves and what they were doing and why. We got the Jay Deadass spot where he dropped down to the ground. All of the things that you wanted to see at a signature. And it didn't really pick up until 20 minutes, like, oh no, this is a really good match. Like it was a match, and then all of a sudden, like it just like everything clicked into place. Everything that had been building throughout the last 6 months, and all just kind of crystallized and catalyzed into the match, and you just kind of felt everything, the Inoki vibe of everything. What were you saying?
I think what really helps the storytelling in the match too is Jay White has established his character as the master counterpuncher, and they played that up heavily in the commentary as well. He has a way of hitting the hidden blade out of other people's finishers and countering them into the hidden blade, which is also very well protected and not as well protected as the others.
The switchblade, not the hidden blade.
Oh, geez, excuse me. I've been up a lot.
I was like, wait, what?
No, you're absolutely right. The Blade Runner. Excuse me, the Blade Runner. So he can hit the Blade Runner out of just about anybody else's finisher, right? And he has a way of getting in and out of that move that is sudden and impactful and has led to finishes, which means when you're rooting for Okada, every time Okada goes for one of his big moves, it's fraught with peril, because you think this could be the time when he eats the Blade Runner and loses. Just because even when your guy is on top, you feel like at any moment it could all just go to hell, because he can hit that move out of any place. And he did a couple of times. There was the Cobra Flosion by Okada, and then got that into the Rainmaker from hell. And boy, did he smoke that one for the win. But in the meantime, there were several times when that Rainmaker was just about countered into the Blade Runner, and he even had to kick out of it once there. But Okada hit an Enziguri, which is, of course, one of Inoki's signature moves. They even hit each other's. There was a Rainmaker from Jay White. There was a Blade Runner from Okada that lit up the whole building. The place, that one got the roof off the joint. This was another one that ended very psychologically. You had the win from Okada. He got the pin off of that big Rainmaker right there. I again emphasize you should go and watch this match, because reading the moves off one by one doesn't do it justice. And similar to a couple of years ago when Kota Ibushi was crowned the king and the first ever IWGP World Heavyweight Champion in a match with Jay White that was absolutely epic. Jay White, after a loss, is a really brilliant player. Just because the match is over doesn't mean his performance is. Jay White crawling to Okada as he posed with the title, holding onto his boot, pulling himself up and doing something. It's not really a handshake. There might have been a touch of mutual respect. It might have simply been.
He was like, "I want my title." Like it was like, I can't. That's mine.
Or I can't accept what just happened. Yes. All of that. And there's some indications afterwards that, Jay, it was utterly despondent in his post-match interview. His performance as a man who felt like he was fulfilling his destiny only to see it crumble. This dude can act. He's really, really great.
He's one of the best in the world, hands down. Yeah. Okada is only as good as the people that he faces, and Jay White.
Oh, I don't think that's true.
No, but that's what I'm saying. But but that's the argument that you say. Like these main event matches, like in a lot of ways, like he's the best guy to face Okada. Like they make each other better. Mm-hmm. Like there is something about Jay White that elevates Okada more than Okada can elevate himself without Jay White. That's what I'm trying to say. Is that they will be lifelong competitors. Their careers will be tied to each other. This era in which they go back and forth, this is going to be something that is going to be established and referred to for a very long time in the future. Jay White has cemented himself in the pantheon of both New Japan and pro wrestling in general. And no one's ever going to argue about Okada's place. But when you think about the contributions that Jay White has done, if Jay White isn't Jay White, Okada doesn't perhaps reach all the levels that he does because his opponent didn't help him get there.
Well, I mean, it definitely takes two to tango, but yes. I think Okada is going to end up being one of the greatest of all time if he's not already.
Absolutely.
And so that's
but Jay White is a very special wrestler, and I just want to make sure he gets his flowers.
Oh yeah, geez. I mean, well, I said it before. He's one of the best big match wrestlers on earth, and in the post match interview, he said that he was going to go after Hikuleo, who he is trying to make put his misplaced blame upon for not fulfilling his destiny. Just despondent and just looked crushed. And he says, well, everything was going great until Hikuleo, and then, maybe he'll take it out on him. Yeah. So, either way, it's just, he was despondent after he lost to Ibushi. Remember, he ended up doing a clean job to
everybody thought he was going to go to WWE.
Yeah, and was gone. And he might someday, he might someday. So, that's a possibility, but not anytime now. And what we're going to see is another year of Jay White trying to rebuild himself. House of Torture is kind of is at the bottom of, has kind of reached a bottom of the barrel moment for them. They've been terribly unsuccessful. This was not overall a good night for Bullet Club.
To be fair, New Year's Dash will be Showtime.
Yeah, well, I mean, well, that's what I'm saying. It's always darkest before the dawn in New Japan, and usually when a faction is at its absolute lowest is when it tends to make a big splash and rally. So I would expect Jay White to come back with a big vengeance, and this is a guy that I'm looking forward to being part of the picture for a long time. And like I said, ultimately, someday you got to think he and Kenny have to square off here, and that's another elephant in the dome right there. Is that there are kind of sort of, even though Kenny's not running around with Bullet Club, Jay can't ignore that forever, right? The former Bullet Club guys there. So many great combinations.
That was the original Forbidden Door match with Kenny versus Jay.
Yeah, who knows?
Rumor had it.
Well, they know. Who knows? I can tell you exactly who knows. They know what the original plan was, didn't they? But anyway, So okay, so moving on from that, Jay White, fantastic. We're gonna love seeing him in main events to come, but it's time to go over it's always time to look toward the locker room whenever the champion is doing his speech at Wrestle Kingdom, right? Shingo Takagi. I mentioned he was part of the clash with Noah in the interview area. He is part of the Final Four for the King of Pro Wrestling title 2023 that will go on at Dash. He's the guy that walked out and challenged Okada at the end. And there was a little bit of confusion as to exactly when he challenged Okada. I'm not sure if he got a date wrong or the translation got a date wrong there, but we believe he's talking about a new beginning in Osaka.
Which is not February 1st?
Yeah, there was a date and a show mentioned that did not correspond. So, again, we don't know if the translation was wrong or if Shingo just kind of tripped something over something there. But Shingo is the one that comes out and lays down the challenge toward Okada there. So Shingo Takagi against Kazuchika Okada will be a terrific match, no question about that. So I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm happy that Shingo, who is a great wrestler, was a big part of the card. And then it ended appropriately with not only the Rainmaker pose and the Rainmaker celebration, but just before he got to the end of the ramp, just before he got back down to the steps there at the big set with all the big screens, there was a microphone waiting for Kazuchika Okada. He took it, and being the modern day superhero babyface of New Japan, he was the one that did the Ich ni san da for Antonio Inoki. That was his catchphrase that the crowd would do along with him. And the show ended appropriately enough with Kazuchika Okada paying that tribute to Inoki.
What a banger of a show, man. That was really a great show. Set the tone for 2023. You want to be match of the year, you gotta be one of these matches. What do you got?
I got something here. This is a souvenir. The folks on YouTube can see it, and for the folks that are listening, I've got a little Inoki doll here, and it's a little action figure. Well, not an action figure; it's a little pop-up thing. So, picture something that looks kind of like a Pez dispenser, but it's attached to a little spring, and you get this here when you hit it. This is a souvenir bought for me by a friend of mine when they went to Japan years and years ago. It's it just kind of pops up like this. And back in the day, it used to. It's dead now, but it used to do the Ichini san da thing. So when you had a little bit of audio to it, and so there you see.
There's a kid in all of us, Conway.
It really is. I have kept this on my shelf. It's sitting there next to over my shoulder. You can see my Kenta Kobashi and Mitsuharu Misawa autographs. So
I love it.
So there you go. That was it for Inoki, who unfortunately didn't get to be at this show for the 50th anniversary of the company he created. It was a very nice tribute there at the very end for the King. So, Jeremy, we did it. We did it, man. Wrestle Kingdom 17.
Our first Wrestle Kingdom review season is in the books. I feel good. We're going to come back next week. We'll talk Mystery Vortex. We'll talk all the stuff that we know that is going to happen that we don't know right now. And I'm excited. So happy birthday to you.
Oh, thank you so much. And it is kind of an exciting time because we've got Mystery Vortex, like you said. That's how we're putting it with New Year's Dash, not knowing anything until the guys come to the ring. We have a Yokohama Dome show, a Wrestle Kingdom show, where we don't have any information on yet. All that's still to come. So normally that little and Fantastica Mania is coming. The CMLL guys are coming to Japan very soon. So what's normally sort of a quieter time, little post Wrestle Kingdom, is actually going to turn out to be pretty exciting for us. We're going to have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we're going to have to talk about there. We'll have New Japan Cup coming in March. Then we'll have tournaments, and then we'll be celebrating a 1-year anniversary. So, man, we've been doing it. We've been going hard, and I'm real happy for the work that we've done. So we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but we do know our socials. So, Conway, why don't you give me those?
Stephen Conway 88. It's right. So that's on me on Twitter. I also have Ringside Replay, my history website, and you can find me on Twitter. And then, of course, I'm a contributor to Fight Game Media. So, Jeremy, what about you?
As am I, a contributor to Fight Game Media. You can find me at Jer Finestone on Twitter, as our name is on the screen to say. We'll be coming to you every week. audio and video options, as we have been made clear. So keep an eye out for that. And Conway, take it home, and I'll do the graphics.
All right, and I just want to mention one thing. We're going to be on the Fight Game Media podcast with Garrett Gonzalez tomorrow, talking about Wrestle Kingdom. So there's going to be even more of us coming. So what more could you ask for than that? So with that in mind, for Jeremy Finestone, I'm Stephen Conway. Thank you again for joining us for Speaking of Strong Style, and we will be back again next week to talk more about New Japan Pro Wrestling. See you then.